To move down here today because the reality is today we are called to do the sermon and the work of the church. I spent a lot of time starting to write a sermon this week that was shortened and that made sense, and every time I went to write it down, it felt like I was shortchanging what was really happening, and that it was more important for me to actually stand here in front of you and kind of experience with you the story of what went on in the last week at this church. And it actually started quite a few weeks ago, and I want to just share with you this way of the story because I truly believe that God opens doors and moves when we're paying attention. And even when we're sometimes not paying attention, things will start clicking, and all of a sudden there comes this moment when you notice and you go, God did that. God brought that in. So as many of you know, a lot of the Mondays when I'm supposed to be here, I haven't been able to be here because of doctor's appointments and other things that are happening. But I was here one Monday and the phone rang and I answered it. Sounds smart. And it was the post office saying, do you want to take food again this year for your food pantry? I think we do, but you'll have to ask Susan. Susan is the one who I send all of this information to, but yes, if we've done that before, it probably makes sense based on the fact that we've all said that we want more with the community, we want to reach out, we want to help, and this is a good alliance. So Susan does her Susan thing, and they agree to do that, and then all of a sudden, I'm here, ironically, this last Monday. And I'm on a conference call with some other people, and all of a sudden I hear people downstairs, and Jack has come up and is just like, you have to see this. And I'm like, what do I have to see? And I go downstairs to see 5 very overwhelmed faces. Susan and Amy and Ed and Jack and Jill just look like they witnessed a car crash. Because if you go downstairs in a minute, you'll see what they saw. 3,500 pounds of food. They had just moved. They waited at the post office because I asked Amy. I was like, how do you know how much it weighed? At the post office, they waited on their weight machines, and that is a ton of food. And all of a sudden, here it is in our space, in our building, going, well, now what do we do? And you can see Susan going, I have no idea what we're going to do. This just looks like so much work. So you know me, by this point you've learned that I say yes to crazy things, and so my brain starts going on Monday. Like the wheels are just turning. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, next week we have the Bible study worship, and then after that we've moved into summer. And how do we get enough people? And all of a sudden I remind myself that what I've been preaching is all about this moment. The moment where God stands in front of you and says, here, I'm giving you a gift of something to do. Now do it. Not the moment of, how do we work this into everything else? But the moment of, make this work. And I was like, that's worship. That's what we're here to do. We are here to help our community and to feed the sheep. We've talked about feeding the sheep. We've talked about saying yes to those opportunities that we don't expect to come into our lives. We are here to say yes and here to reach out and help do the work that God has called us to do, which means we're all of a sudden here with 3,500 pounds of food, and we got to figure out what to do with it. And not in 2 weeks, not in 3 weeks, but now.
Mom, can you preach your sermon?
That's coming. I'm getting to it. I promise.
I writed it.
I know you did. Have a seat. I get to it. Trust me. My little preacher kid is ready to go here. So with all of that being said, the wheels are turning. I'm calling Susan. I'm calling Jack. I'm calling Jill. I'm calling everyone going, okay, let's talk about this. But I also didn't want to shortchange worship because some people come to worship for different reasons. Some of you aren't able to stay and help, and some of you needed to come pray, and some of you needed to mourn, and some of you needed to hear this story. But a lot of us need to also do the mission work, especially when it comes to my generation. I know my generation doesn't come to sit. We come to sit and learn and worship so that we can go do. We like to do. We don't like just to hear about it. We like to actually engage and do it. And so this is a huge opportunity for us to be the church. It's a huge opportunity for us to be in community together, to talk to one another, but to also feed out to others. So anyway, I'm talking, and I'm like, okay, we're going to shorten worship. It's going to be a shortened sermon. We can cut back in some different areas. And then everyone here, all of you are invited to go downstairs. If we need to set up chairs, we can. There is a ton of food, and it will take a moment to get everybody organized and the system in place. So it won't be always the most smooth thing that is happening, but it is the God thing that is happening. Because in the midst of all of this, we do realize that some of the food may expire. And we don't want that to happen. So all of a sudden I find myself on a phone because 10 years ago, as many of you who are teachers and educators know, the youth service centers in the school have some quality programs of giving out food to the families who need them. So I'm all of a sudden on the phone with Beechgrove Elementary and the school that's right up here, which is Summit View. I want to say Simon Kenton, which is the high school, Summit View. I'm learning. But I'm communicating with both of their offices. Beechgrove has a summer program. They have a summer program with free lunches, but they don't have any way over the summer to help the kids during that program over the weekend. They're like, please, give us the food and whatever you have and help us. And then Summit View doesn't have the summer program, but all of a sudden they're telling us we've been cut in grants. Our grants have been cut, and we have kids in a few months who are going to need school supplies and other things. I also said to them, if something happens, a lot of times at schools tragedies or things happen, we're a community that's not far from your school. We can help you. We can open our doors. If you need space to gather some of these things, we have some space. So isn't it amazing that all of a sudden in this story, not only do we have this food from the community, but we're all of a sudden being able to give it back. And in multitudes of ways, and not only that, but make connections for the future of ways, because all of a sudden we had a reason to call. We didn't just call as a cold call, we had a reason to go, we have all of this food and we want to make sure we can use it. We want to make sure it goes to families and other people. And in the midst of all of that, I've been talking to the reporter here, and we have a news article going in to the newspaper around here about what we're doing. And we're doing that so that we can share with others, but not to bring them in the building, but to show them what we're doing outside of the building. And you are a part of that story. You are a part of just God. God opened the door. It was like Pentecost came on Monday instead of Sunday, where all of a sudden the wind swooped in and everybody's standing there. And it was so fun this week to put those pieces together. It's been truly inspirational to look at people and say, this week I got to change church up. We get to worship, but we get to do the work we're called to do. And that's exciting, and that is your story, and you can share that. Remember, you are a part of God's story. You are a part of the Pentecost story. You are a part of the resurrection story. You are a part of all of this moving. And if you don't believe that, then look what God is doing. God is putting it in front of all of us and saying, here you go. Respond. Here you go. You said you wanted to feed my sheep. Well, here's some food. You said you wanted to reach out to the community. Well, here you go. You said you want people to know what you're doing and that you exist. I've given you a ton of food. Now you can put it in a back shelf and try to respond to it later, or you can choose to respond now. And so today, we are responding. We are responding now to God's call. On the Sabbath, it is a day to not do our work, but to do God's work. And so much so that this morning, my son did write it. He said, Mommy, did you write a sermon? And I said, no, I felt it was better just to talk from the heart. And he said, well, I'll write your sermon. And so he did. He wrote this sermon on here, and he said, how to make food. Because he asked me what we were doing, and I said, well, we're working with food to help feed people. And he said, how to make food. And what's it say? It says Jesus knows what to do.
Yes.
Jesus knows what to do. How to make food. Jesus knows what to do. And then he wrote love. Sounds like a good sermon to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen.